really fit in at all on this team?
Well, I mean, he's with the one, so it's right. A starting role still for Jeudy, but I do wonder if this is kind of, it is the handwriting on the wall for Jerry, because it certainly feels like through a couple of practices in the spring,
there's been some bad drops on social media at training camp that has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And last year was basically a disaster for him, a lost season for Jeudy.
We think we were out there a dozen times. And then yesterday was day number 17 of training camp. You kind of know what the future of this wide receiver position group looks like. And
Jeudy is talented, but they need a guy that it's one-on-one. I'm going to him. 87, 89%, 90% chance. That's a completion. Mm-hmm. They need a Jamar Chase. They need a Justin Jefferson. That's what they need. They need a Jackson Smith and Jigba. They need one of Nico Collins. They need one of those dudes where one-on-one, oh, I'm good. I'm throwing it to him.
Something is changing inside the Cleveland Browns receiver room, and Jeudy might be the biggest name caught in the middle of it. For a long time, Jeudy looked like one of the safest pieces in this offense. He had the experience, he had the contract, and he had the kind of name recognition that usually keeps a veteran comfortable. But this summer has started to tell a very different story, because the Browns are suddenly getting younger, faster, and a whole lot more competitive at wide receiver. And that is where the pressure starts to build. The biggest issue for Jeudy right now is not one single bad practice or one mistake. It is the fact that the Browns finally have options behind him. That changes everything. When a veteran knows there is nobody ready to take his reps, he can survive a rough stretch. He can have a few drops, a quiet day, maybe even a bad week, and the depth chart usually stays the same. But when young receivers start making plays every day, those same mistakes suddenly look a lot bigger. Casey Concepcion has been getting attention. Denzel Boston has been getting attention. Isaiah Bond has been getting attention. And when that many younger players start showing up at the same time, the veteran standing in front of them has to feel that heat. That is what makes this situation so interesting. The Browns do not have to force anything anymore. They do not have to keep a veteran on the field just because they have nobody else. They can actually compare production, effort, consistency, and value. And when a team starts doing that honestly, expensive veterans are always going to be under a brighter spotlight. Jeudy is still talented.
Where it says the Browns are releasing veteran wide receiver Cedric Tillman. Per sources, Cleveland spent 2 early 2026 draft picks on wide receivers, and now Tillman is out. Now, we knew this dude was going to be gone. I mean, Cedric Tillman, he's been terrible since he got with the Browns. But now the talks are picking up that, hey, Jeudy could be next. He's on the hook for a lot of money. They could cut bait with this guy. But, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, Casey Concepcion's been a standout. Denzel Boston has been a standout. Isaiah Bond has been a standout. Jeudy is getting paid way too much to be have the 4th best production all the way up to the regular season out of all the receivers throughout camp. It's just not good enough.
Nobody has to pretend otherwise. He can run routes, create separation, and make big plays when he is locked in. But talent alone does not guarantee anything in the NFL, especially when a roster starts changing around you. The Browns are clearly trying to build something different at wide receiver, and every young player who flashes makes Jeudy's position feel just a little less comfortable. That is why the recent roster movement matters so much. When teams start moving on from players in the same position group, everybody else notices. It sends a message through the room. No job is completely protected. No name is too big to be evaluated. No contract can stop a coaching staff from asking one simple question: who gives us the best chance to win right now? And Jeudy is suddenly right in the middle of that question. This is not about saying Cleveland is definitely cutting him tomorrow. That would be a stretch, but it is fair to say the pressure around him is much different now than it was a few months ago. The young guys are not waiting politely for their turn. They are pushing for snaps, pushing for targets, and pushing the coaching staff to make harder decisions. That is exactly how a veteran can go from feeling secure to fighting for his role without anybody ever officially saying it out loud. The Browns also have to look at this from a roster building standpoint. Young receivers are cheaper. They are hungry. They can grow with the offense. And if 1 or 2 of them can give Cleveland similar production for a fraction of the cost, then the front office eventually has to ask whether keeping a high-priced veteran still makes sense. That is the uncomfortable part of this business. Jeudy cannot just be good anymore. He has to clearly separate himself. He has to prove that his experience matters, that his route running matters, that his chemistry matters, and most importantly, that he is still better than the players trying to take his spot.
No, didn't really think so.
The reason I asked, CBS Sports had like cut candidates, and they listed Jerry Jeudy as a possible cut candidate for the Cleveland Browns, and I'm like, not yet. But my issue is I can't find a reason to not cut him.
Why are you keeping him? There's only one reason I think he stays on the team.
Why is that?
I think it's clear the starting quarterback has a best friend on the team. I think it's Jerry Jeudy.
Well,
if you look at go back and rewatch those TV broadcasts, and not just the thing that went down with him flashing fours and all that,
whether or not that was real or not,
they're always beside each other on the sideline. Didn't they go to Cavs games together?
They're clearly friendly with each other, and by the way, that's fine. Again, we talked about it yesterday.
Because if that gap starts shrinking, Cleveland suddenly has a decision it did not have before, and right now, that gap looks a lot smaller than anybody expected. The biggest reason Jerry Jeudy should be feeling pressure right now is simple. The young receivers are no longer just camp bodies fighting for the last few roster spots. They are starting to look like real options in this offense, and that can change a veteran's situation very quickly. Casey Concepcion has brought energy. Denzel Boston has brought size and playmaking ability. Isaiah Bond has shown enough to stay in the conversation. That is 3 younger receivers giving Cleveland reasons to keep watching them, and every good practice they put together makes the receiver room more crowded. For Jerry Jeudy, that matters a lot. This is not the same situation Cleveland had before, when Jeudy could walk into the building knowing the offense needed him because there were not enough proven options behind him. Now the Browns have younger players making legitimate cases for more snaps, more targets, and bigger roles. Once that starts happening, coaches have choices. And once coaches have choices, nobody can assume their spot is safe. Denzel Boston might be the most interesting example because of how quickly he has made himself noticeable. He has the size to win contested catches, he can attack the football in the air, and he gives the Browns a different kind of target on the outside. He does not have to become a superstar overnight to create pressure. He only has to keep showing that he can handle more responsibility. Casey Concepcion brings another problem for Jeudy because his game adds a different kind of stress to a defense. He can move around, find space, create yards after the catch, and give the offense another player it can manufacture touches for. The more comfortable Cleveland gets using him in different ways, the harder it becomes to automatically feed veteran snaps to somebody else, just because that is how the depth chart used to look. Then there is Isaiah Bond, another player who has enough speed and upside to keep pushing for opportunities. Even if he is not taking Jeudy's exact role, he still matters because every receiver who proves he deserves to be on the field takes snaps from somebody. That is where this entire situation gets dangerous for a veteran. The NFL does not care how comfortable the depth chart looked in May. It does not care what somebody was projected to be before training camp started.
I know he's a veteran. Is he veteran leadership in that room, in that wide receiver room?
Jerry Jeudy? Yeah. Well, I'm not sure, but I think I can give you one reason. Speaking about this, Lima, you had said yesterday that you're not hearing anything that's coming out of the building about players or anything being opposed to Deshaun Watson or anything. For that matter, you're not hearing anything about Shedeur, the backup quarterback. We're not allowed to say his name, apparently. It's dumb.
Yep, you got to reset it.
We got to reset the what? The
clock.
The clock,
yeah,
okay.
We had gone an entire 10 minutes without mentioning his name. But darn tootin'. Now we're right back where we started.
You're not going to hear anything. I think both are likable to their teammates. And hell, you heard Shedeur you heard the backup back on Saturday where he said he didn't really care for people booing Deshaun Watson. So they seem to get along with each other. It's weird. There's definitely a split amongst fans of who they'd like to. Well, there's a vast majority now who would like to start Shedeur Sanders after Saturday. But they seem to be getting along with each other for the most part as a team. I'm sure there's definitely some guys who don't get along with each other. That happens. You got 90 guys in there. Things are going to happen. But
if young players keep making plays, the depth chart changes. Coaches start experimenting. Rotations get tighter. Snap counts get redistributed. And suddenly a veteran who once felt locked into a major role starts looking over his shoulder. Jeudy's biggest challenge is that these young players do not have to beat him in every category. They do not need to be better route runners right now. They do not need more experience. They do not need to know every trick he knows. They just need to give the Browns enough production, energy, and upside that the coaching staff starts asking whether the gap is really worth the price difference. That question can become uncomfortable fast, and this is why every camp rep matters so much. If Boston makes another tough catch, that matters. If Concepcion creates separation and turns a short pass into a bigger gain, that matters. If Bond stretches the defense and forces the secondary to respect his speed, that matters. Those moments add up. For Jeudy, the pressure is not coming from one player. It is coming from the entire room. That makes this much more serious than a normal position battle. Cleveland is not looking at one young receiver trying to take one veteran's job. They are looking at several young players who may all deserve meaningful roles. If 3 younger receivers keep pushing forward at the same time, the coaching staff eventually has to decide where those snaps are coming from. And Jerry Jeudy is one of the obvious places people are going to look. The veteran still has advantages. He has experience. He understands NFL coverages. He knows how to work against different defensive looks. He has already produced at this level. But those advantages only matter if he keeps showing them consistently. Because the moment a veteran starts blending in with the young players behind him, his contract and his reputation stop protecting him. Now the Cedric Tillman move becomes important. Because this is where the pressure around Jerry Jeudy starts to feel a lot more real. When a team starts trimming players from the same position group, everybody in that room notices. It changes the mood immediately. What looked like a normal training camp competition can suddenly turn into a warning. The Browns are showing that they are willing to make tough decisions at wide receiver. And once that starts happening, nobody should assume their name alone is enough to keep them protected. That does not mean Jerry Jeudy is automatically next, but it absolutely means Cleveland is evaluating this room hard.
I think I have a football reason right off the top of my head as we were talking. Does Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston make Jerry Judy's job easier?
I thought so.
Okay.
And in a way, I thought in a way, vice versa, because we know he's had his issues here and the drops kind of come and go, but when they come, and he just seems like he's mentally out of the game. But we also remember the game where, it was like a record-setting game against his old team. Like, we know nobody's ever disputed that the talent was there or wasn't. What we were always reacting to, is he a good guy to have in the locker room? Well, locker rooms change every year, obviously.
Of course.
And, Judy's been at everything. He's been a little inconsistent in camp. He's had days where he's been great, and he's had other bad days. That's pretty much mirrored his entire career.
And that is the key difference. For most of the offseason, it was easy to look at Jeudy and assume his role was already settled. He is the veteran. He has experience. He has been one of the bigger names in the room. But the Browns have now added young receivers, watched some of them flash, and started making roster decisions around the group. Once all of those things happen together, the entire hierarchy can change faster than people expect. That is why Tillman being moved out matters beyond Tillman himself. It tells you Cleveland is not afraid to clear space. It tells you the front office is willing to make room for younger options. And most importantly, it tells you that this receiver room is not frozen in place. That is where Jeudy has to be careful. If the Browns really believe KC Concepcion, Denzel Boston, and Isaiah Bond can all help this offense, then Cleveland eventually has to figure out where the snaps come from. You cannot put 6 wide receivers on the field at once. Somebody gets pushed down. Somebody loses targets. Somebody becomes more expensive than their role justifies. And that is where the veteran usually starts feeling the squeeze. Jeudy has one major advantage right now. He has already done it in real NFL games. That experience matters. Young receivers can look great in camp, but regular season football is different. Defenses disguise coverages. Corners get more physical. Mistakes become more expensive. Coaches trust veterans because veterans have already been through that. But experience is not a lifetime pass. If Cleveland believes the young receivers are developing quickly enough, then the question starts to become uncomfortable. How much longer does experience outweigh youth, upside, and cost?
But I think you want to start the season with as much weaponry as you can, unless you feel like he's demanding the ball or anything. And have you ever felt that Jeudy has been that guy?
No.
Here in Cleveland, I don't think it's been that.
Demanded the ball.
I don't think he's even in a position to demand the ball, because I think that the attention's been on Boston and Concepcion the whole time, and even Isaiah Bond really could be taking snaps from him this year.
Yeah, but even going back to the last couple of years, I'm sure he wants the ball. He's a wide receiver. He should want the ball.
But has he been?
Who's the highest paid in the room?
It would be him.
Yeah. So,
but has he been real vocal about it?
No, we haven't heard that yet. That's something that you see. Body language wise, probably first. That's probably your first read, right?
Now he has been
in-game body language.
Now, and he has absolutely had some bad body language in games, and him and Shedeur got into it. But receivers do get into it with quarterbacks. I don't think that means you throw them off the team. So I'm a little mixed on this. I want things to be.
Last year we didn't have any other options.
Right.
No.
I want things to be as easy on Concepcion and Boston as humanly possible.
That is the kind of question front offices ask all the time. And the Browns are in a position where they can actually ask it now because they finally have depth. Last year, moving on from a veteran receiver would have created an obvious hole. Now, Cleveland can look around the room and see multiple young players fighting to fill those snaps. That is a huge difference. It also means Jeudy cannot afford to drift through camp. He cannot afford long stretches where he disappears. He cannot afford the kind of inconsistency that might have been overlooked before, because every quiet day gives somebody else another chance to stand out. And once the coaches start trusting the younger players, things can move fast. A rookie does not need to take Jeudy's entire job in 1 week. That is not how these situations usually happen. First, he takes a few snaps. Then he gets a package. Then he earns third down work. Then maybe he becomes part of the red zone plan. Before long, the veteran looks up and his role is smaller than it was a month ago. That is how roster pressure builds. And this is why the Browns' recent decisions should matter to Jeudy more than any headline or outside rumor. The team itself is showing that it is willing to reshape the room. Cleveland is not just collecting young receivers for the future. Those players are being given real opportunities now. They are forcing decisions now. And every time the Browns choose youth over familiarity somewhere in this position group, it sends the same message again. Produce, or somebody else is waiting. For Jerry Jeudy, that may be the biggest change of all. He is no longer standing in a receiver room where the Browns desperately need him to be one of the only reliable options. He is standing in a receiver room where several younger players are trying to prove Cleveland does not have to depend on him the same way anymore. And this is where Jerry Jeudy's contract starts becoming a much bigger part of the conversation, because once younger receivers begin producing, the Browns are not only comparing talent anymore, they are comparing value. That is a very different kind of pressure. When you are one of the highest paid receivers in the room, the expectations naturally rise.
This is just, like Boston came into camp immediately, and he was high pointing everything, and he was boxing guys out. He was skying up to make grabs. But then, if you noticed, as we got further along in practice, he couldn't get any separation against Denzel Ward.
Yes,
and that's Denzel Ward. But he's going to go up against better guys. So it's you don't want to, especially if this all is about Shedeur eventually. You don't want to make it to where it's Shedeur and rookies.
No.
And second-year Harold Fannin. That's a dangerous place to be.
Well, and going back to what Ryan Fitzpatrick said, that's part of the reason why Deshaun would start is he's the veteran, can throw with better anticipation, and you got rookies out there. And maybe that's what Jerry Jeudy's been quietly thinking without actually saying it. I mean, it would go to stand about the truth of the matter of it. But if the money's already paid, and I got two other, last year, I thought it was pretty easy to bracket Jerry Jeudy. Harold Fannin ended up being I think at first they didn't respect Harold Fannin. I think as the season went on, they certainly respected Harold Fannin. And then you had to play a little bit better defense against him. But you think about last year, they had so few options, especially after the Quinshon Judkins injury.
Cleveland is not paying Jerry Jeudy just to blend in with everybody else. They are paying him to be reliable, productive, experienced, and clearly better than the young players trying to climb the depth chart. If that difference starts getting smaller, then the money suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. That does not mean Cleveland should cut a veteran simply because a rookie had a few good practices. That would make no sense. But if the Browns begin to believe that Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, or Isaiah Bond can give them meaningful production at a much lower cost, then the front office eventually has to look at the entire picture. That is how NFL rosters are built. Teams are always searching for younger players who can outperform their contracts. That is one of the biggest advantages any team can have. If Cleveland has young receivers giving them legitimate production while they are still on rookie deals, that creates flexibility everywhere else on the roster. And suddenly, Jeudy has to justify why his price tag still makes sense. This is where the standard changes for him. A rookie can have an average day and still be viewed as promising. A young receiver can make a mistake and coaches can call it part of the learning process. Jerry Jeudy does not really get that same luxury anymore. He is the veteran. He is supposed to know the offense. He is supposed to understand leverage, coverage, spacing, timing, and all the little details that separate experienced NFL receivers from young players. So when he has an inconsistent stretch, people notice it differently. The question becomes, why is the expensive veteran not separating himself? And that is a dangerous question for any player, because once coaches and front office people start asking that, they are not just looking at one drop pass. They are looking at everything. How many snaps does he deserve? How many targets should he get? Is he helping the quarterback enough? Is he making the offense better? And most importantly, could Cleveland get close to the same production from somebody younger? Those are business questions as much as football questions. And the NFL can be cold when those two things start lining up. Jeudy still has a path to shut down all of this noise. He can simply make the decision easy. If he goes out there and clearly looks like one of the best receivers on the roster, then Cleveland has no reason to overthink it. Veterans survive roster pressure by being obviously valuable. But if the production stays close between him and the young guys, then the decision gets much more complicated. That is why the development of Boston and Concepcion matters so much. Every step they take forward increases the expectations on Jeudy. If Boston proves he can win outside, that gives Cleveland another option. If Concepcion proves he can be moved around the formation and consistently create something with the football, that gives Cleveland another option. If Bond earns a real role with his speed, that gives Cleveland another option. Options are what create leverage for a front office, and Cleveland did not have enough of those options before. That is why people should not look at this as some random Jerry Jeudy rumor. The real story is that the Browns are building a receiver room where they might not have to depend on him nearly as much as they once did. That changes his entire position inside the offense. A veteran can be expensive and completely safe when the team has nobody behind him. But when three younger receivers start pushing at the same time, the same contract can suddenly look a lot heavier. That is the pressure Jeudy is facing now. And there is another part people sometimes forget. The Browns do not only have to think about this season, they have to think about what this offense is supposed to look like 1 year from now, 2 years from now, and beyond. If Cleveland believes these younger receivers are going to become major pieces of the offense, then their roles are only going to grow. More snaps, more targets, more responsibility. That leaves fewer opportunities for everybody else. So Jerry Jeudy is not just competing against these young receivers today. He may also be competing against what Cleveland believes they can become tomorrow. And that is why his contract matters so much. The Browns are not asking whether Jeudy can still play. Of course he can. The real question is whether his production, consistency, and veteran presence still separate him enough from the cheaper players climbing right behind him. And this is where Jerry Jeudy's margin for error starts getting dangerously small, because every mistake looks different when there are younger receivers right behind you making plays. That is the part people cannot ignore. A drop is never just a drop when you are fighting to protect your role. A quiet practice is never just a quiet practice when somebody younger is having a big day. And one bad stretch can suddenly feel a lot heavier when the coaching staff has multiple alternatives waiting for more snaps. That is the position Jeudy is in now. For a veteran, consistency is supposed to be one of the biggest advantages. Coaches expect you to know where to line up. They expect you to understand the coverage. They expect you to be where the quarterback needs you to be. They expect you to make the routine plays that young players sometimes miss. So when the veteran starts having the same kind of mistakes that rookies are expected to grow out of, the questions get louder. That is what makes every rep so important for Jeudy right now. If he has a drop, the coaches see it. If he loses focus, the coaches see it. If he has a day where he does not separate enough, the coaches see that too. And then they look at the next receiver in line and ask a very simple question: can we get more from somebody else? That question used to be harder for Cleveland to ask. Now it is not. Because Casey Concepcion is pushing, Denzel Boston is pushing, Isaiah Bond is pushing. Those players do not need to be perfect. They just need to keep stacking enough good moments that the coaches trust them more and more. That is how snap counts start shifting. At first, it might be 5 extra plays for a younger receiver, then maybe 10. Then suddenly that player is getting a designed package. Then he is on the field in a key third down situation. Then he is stealing a red zone target. That is how a veteran role starts shrinking without one dramatic announcement. And Jerry Jeudy knows how fast that can happen in this league. The biggest danger for him is not that Cleveland suddenly decides he cannot play. The bigger danger is that Cleveland starts believing they do not need him to do as much. That is a very different problem. Because once a team believes it can spread the production across younger players, the veteran becomes easier to replace. Maybe not immediately, maybe not all at once, but the dependence starts disappearing. And once that happens, every mistake feels more expensive. Jeudy has had stretches in his career where the talent is obvious. He can still create space. He can still make tough catches. He can still give a quarterback a reliable target when he is locked in. But the problem has always been what happens when that consistency disappears. And now Cleveland has less reason to wait around for it to come back. If Boston is making strong catches outside, why pull him off the field? If Concepcion is moving the chains and creating yards after the catch, why reduce his role? If Bond is stretching the field and creating space for everybody else, why not keep feeding him opportunities? Those are the questions that can turn one veteran's bad day into another player's breakthrough. That is why this camp matters so much for Jeudy. He does not just need flashes anymore. He does not just need one strong practice every few days. He needs to show the Browns that he is still dependable enough to deserve a major role every week. Because the younger receivers are building cases too, and younger players usually have one thing working in their favor that veterans do not: patience. If a rookie makes a mistake, coaches can say he is still learning. If a rookie has a quiet day, they can say he needs more reps. If a veteran makes the same mistake, the reaction is different. The veteran is expected to already have those answers. That pressure is real, and it becomes even more important when a team is clearly evaluating the entire receiver room. Cleveland is not just deciding who starts. They are deciding how many snaps each player deserves, who fits the long-term plan, and who is worth the investment. That is why Jeudy cannot afford to drift. Every good day helps him protect his spot. Every bad day gives somebody else an opening. And every time a younger receiver takes advantage of that opening, the competition gets tighter. That is exactly how veterans lose ground in the NFL. Not always with one huge mistake. Not always with one shocking decision. Sometimes it happens one rep at a time, one target at a time, one young player earning more trust at a time. And when you put all of this together, Jerry Jeudy's situation suddenly looks a lot less comfortable than it did before. The Browns have younger receivers pushing for bigger roles. The competition inside that room is getting tighter. Roster decisions are already showing that Cleveland is willing to make changes. And the more those young players prove they belong, the harder it becomes for any veteran to assume his role is guaranteed. That is the real story here. This is not about saying Jerry Jeudy has no value. He does. He has experience, talent, and he has already shown that he can produce in this league. But the Browns are reaching a point where they may not need to depend on him the same way anymore. And that changes everything. Because once a team starts finding younger players who can contribute, veterans have to do more than just hold their spot. They have to prove why they still deserve it. That is where Jeudy is now. He has to separate himself from KC Concepcion. He has to separate himself from Denzel Boston. He has to prove that Isaiah Bond is not ready to take more of those snaps. And he has to show Cleveland that his experience still gives this offense something the younger receivers cannot replace yet. If he does that, this conversation can disappear fast. But if the young receivers keep climbing, if Jeudy stays inconsistent, and if Cleveland keeps reshaping this room, then the questions are only going to get louder. How much longer is he guaranteed a major role? How much longer does the contract protect him? And at what point do the Browns decide that the future of this receiver room has already arrived? That is what makes this situation so interesting going into the season. Because Jerry Jeudy is no longer just competing with the defense. He is competing with the players standing right behind him on the depth chart, and those players are getting harder and harder to ignore. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Jerry Jeudy should still be one of the main receivers in this Browns offense? Or do you think Cleveland should start giving those young guys even more opportunities? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you want more Browns news, training camp updates, roster battles, and everything happening around this team, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what happens next.